Good morning to one and all. This is Dr. P. Lavanya, working as Associate Professor in MBA Department in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering in Dundigal. So, in our last video, we have seen regarding that what is the price discrimination at international level and which we consider it as a dumping activities. Means once the Indians rules, regulations and the laws, and we have the GATT principles, that is General Agreements for Trade and Tariffs, which was adjusting the international level of price discrimination, and at the same way anti-dumping activities is another academy where itself it's a finding in India that not to dump the lots of resources or the output into the external environment. So we have seen in our last video that what's an Indian's perspective relating to the rules, what are the articles or the rules provided relating to the dumping activities at GATT principles, and what are the multilateral agreements or the systems at an international level relating to the anti-dumping activities. So in this context, we'll see what the Indian purview or Indian context of these dumping activities from the last or the previous years. So for that we'll see the one of the important item in our Indian sector or the important product for Indian sector is the steel, iron and the steel manufacturing. So as India is having a lot of firms in case of steel manufacturing, but also due to the developing nature of Indian environment, we are unable to self-sufficient ourselves in case of steel manufacturing. So in this sense, India is also one of the regular customer for taking or exporting the iron and steel from the other nations. As the Indian iron and steel industry itself is facing challenges due to the influx of cheap steel imports from the other countries. Means maybe we are able to get the product or demanded a product from the external nations, but whatever the internal aspect is, the quality relating to the steel manufacturing is maybe the cheap when we compared with the other nations. Particularly, we have a largely dominated nation which was in supply of iron and steel, particularly the China. So the Indian people are from the last decades before 2020, the India is in a larger exporting the steel from the China, and this has leads to the declining in the domestic of steel prices, affecting the profitability of the Indian steel manufacturers. So as we have been come across to here that as these domestic steel prices means as China itself is providing a sufficient demanded steel, but the quality is not at all good. As we know, the duplication is more in China. So at the time, due to the lack of quality, they are providing it at cheaper rates. But when the internal cost of the Indian manufacturers, maybe in case of manufacturing iron and steel, the internal cost or the manufacturing cost is more in India when we compared with China. So due to that, when the less priced Chinese steel was coming into the India, and automatically the companies what are present in Indian manufacturers has to sell at a low profitability for the within the country. So in this way the steel manufacturers was affected by the dumping aspects of China. For that we'll see that as Indian steel importers has been increased, means year by year from the last 2 years or the decades, we used to identify that 20% of India was increased or need of this steel, maybe for due to the expansion of infrastructure facilities in India or the construction or the developing nature of the Indian context. Every year the country is required 20% of steel from external countries. So along with that, the Indian government is also providing a lot of subsidiaries and other types of things where they has been decreased by 15% during the same period. Means the prices due to these dumping activities, the local steel prices was decreasing by 15%. But India's steel exported to the from China has been given from the last decades was 25%. Means we require the need of only 20%, and our local price was decreased by 15%, and what we are getting from external cheaper China was 25%. Means we are dumping inside the requirement, that is 5% more than what is actual required for India. So, on this context, we can analyze some sort of anti-dumping regulatory activities relating to the Chinese steel manufacturing. So, in this analysis, we go for imposing of anti-dumping duties. Anti-dumping duties means these are the fines or the penalties or increasing the custom charges when the goods was exported from the other nations. So these sort of duties or the taxes that the central government can impose upon these Chinese importing steel, and due to this it will make less economical and viable for foreign goods to flood in Indian market with cheaper steel. Means when the taxes was imposed and increases, automatically the price from externally dumped goods will be equal to the internal or the nominal price of the our country, such that the foreign goods, the cheapest or the low quality goods cannot be flooded into the India and make uneconomical of the steel prices. Means our Indian consumers or the Indian steel traders will be benefited if we dump more anti-dumping duties upon the external steel which we are getting from China. That is one type of restrictions we can take relating to the steel industry. And the next one relating to this analysis of the steel dumping in India from China may be like strengthening the trade regulations. So our regulations what we have relating to the multilateral agreements or maybe through our general agreements for trade and tariff principles, where we want to strengthen by preventing the unfair trade practices. As we know, the Monopolistic Restricted Act, Monopoly Restricted Trade Practices Act was there, which was given after independence. So this act has been restricted that concentration of the wealth in the fewer people or the fewer landlords or others. So in case of foreign regulation circumstances also, the Indian government has been brought the rule of Foreign Regulation Act. So this monopoly restricted trade practices has been converted into the International or the Foreign Regulation Act, where itself has been given some rules, regulations, and we should modify another strengthening activities in order to make not to dump the excess goods if they are not required within the country. So the trade regulation to be tightened, and we has to follow the international principles in the Foreign Regulation Act while going for these anti-dumping activities. And next one we can say like in case of the above steel manufacturing contest, it will promotes the domestic production. Means rather than going for external exporting of the goods and services, the internally the government of India can encourage the investors to invest in domestic steel production, and also through incentives, subsidies, or boosting the competitiveness of Indian steel in quality and price. As we have before independence itself, we have a very good and also the sophisticated steel plants, not only in the government sector, we have the private sector like Tata Steel. So once the government will keep a good eye upon that, providing these private sector steel plants also with some incentives, subsidiaries, and making Indian steel maybe competitive with a good quality, such that externally or internationally, rather than exporting the steel from China or other countries, we ourselves are competitor to export our goods to the another nations, maybe which are required. So the government has to take some measures or some important acts has to be installed such that the domestic steel manufacturer could be strengthened in terms of quality and also in terms of price. And along with that, we can have engaged the central government of India can also engage with bilateral talks. Means, as we know, these multilateral means different nations. Bilateral means between two countries. Bi means two, where we can say we central government itself come with an agreement to required or a diplomatic discussions we can done with the other country, exporting country, and we can address. So what are the unfavorable situation that internal due to the dumping of that goods or services, what internally happening. We should explain to the other nations and we can address the issues of dumping and we can work mutual benefits of the trade agreements. Means rather than possibility of dumping the goods in other nations or getting the goods from our country, we ourselves can come within a good discussion with one or other country. Bilateral means between the two countries and good trade agreements we can take, and we should avoid the dumping and create a good environment for international trade. So these are the some of the analytical discussion we can done relating to the steel dumping in India from China. So with this example, we can go for another example relating to this dumping also. Like India is facing a dumping in the problem in the form of electronic waste. So as we know that e-waste, electronic waste is a very big problem for every developing nations. We won't say that only is India is facing the e-waste problem. No, but all the nations who are in a developing state where they want to adopt the innovative technology. Once they adopted the innovative technology, the old technologies become outdated or waste. So they are converted in the form of e-waste. So how to dispose these e-waste? So it is one of the a very burning problem for every developing nations like India. So the dumping of these e-waste will provide or possess the environmental and also the health assets as improper disposal methods, which leads to the employed or leads to the pollution and health risk of the local communities. As we know that these e-waste when are dumped, so the electronic magnets or the waste water they have been different types of gases will be evolved, causing different types of pollution like air, water and earth pollution. At the same way, due to these carbons evolved due to these e-waste, automatically causing different types of health risk and also giving different new viruses are evolving and health problems are arising in the community. So this is also one of the burning problem in case of dumping of the e-wastes. So for that we can say that every year maybe the data what we statistically collected relating to the dumping of these e-waste were for every year that India is having 30% of increased in the e-waste for every 5 years. For every 5 years, 30% of e-waste are dumping in India. Out of it, 75% are imported e-waste improperly disposal, which causing environmental pollution. Means these increased 30% itself, having 75% was imported from the other nations and which are not at all being disposed properly. If they are not disposed properly, that will be converted or causing the environmental pollution within the country. And health issues are organized relating to the e-waste because of dumping these e-waste, e-exposures. Different types of health issues are observing in India by 20% of by the e-dumpings of India. So these e-waste creating environmental pollution and at the same way maybe increased e-waste or not having a proper disposable system for these e-waste is creating health hazards which was increasing 20% year by year in India. So for that we can analyze or we can suggest some analyses relating to the e-waste problem in India or maybe to the developing nations. The first analyzation relating to this e-waste we can see is strict enforcement of e-waste regulations. So as we have seen that out of 30% in the last data what we collected here is out of 30% increased e-waste in India is 75% are exported. So once the country is having strict rules and regulations relating to the importing of these e-wastes, means automatically this pollution can be decreased. And at the same way, the strengthening and rigorous enforcement of existing regulations on the imports and the disposing of e-waste means we have to enforce more strengthened rules and regulations relating to the importing and dispose of the e-waste. And this disposal mechanism has to be identified with proper recycling or disposal methods. Means they has to have the good disposable methods, and recycling of the e-waste also be done in a careful manner. We should not use or we should not recycle in any of the utilizations such that it is used which will not cause any sort of health hazards to the human beings. So in this way, the first analysis or the solution for the e-waste was a e-waste regulator mechanism to be identified for recycling and disposal. And when we comes from the second solutions like international collaborations. So the collaborating of the country regarding to the e-waste. So India has to be create an enforceable global stands for e-waste management and ensuring responsible for disposal practices. Means as India itself is startupping itself innovative mechanisms and innovative methods in case of recycling of these e-waste. So when we are going for this recycling or disposal of the e-waste, so India enforcing a global standards or innovative mechanisms such that these will gives a best e-waste mechanism for every electronic disposal. So after disposal, so what type of management we can done? So at a global standards, this was given as a teaching pedagogy for universities relating to the waste management. So India was propagating or widely spreading these e-waste management disposal such that it will ensure a responsible disposable practices, which means due to these global standards of e-waste management mechanism, so naturally or health hazards should not be caused and environmental safe methods are being followed in case of disposing these practices. And another important solution we can come relating to these e-waste was public awareness campaign. So we should conduct public awareness campaigns to educating the consumers, business people, mainly the business people. The consumers, maybe awareness is done, but only the 10 to 20% the consumers will respond. But when you comes under the business people and local communities relating to this e-waste, and when we use a more campaigning activities relating to the disposal of the e-waste and proper maintenance of them, such that the environment and health hazards should not be created. Means here, by seeing these e-waste mechanism, so we can say that the health hazards or not has to be created. Once the wide publications, maybe the campaigning we can done through mass media, or maybe we used to identify that many products, maybe like cigars and other products, maybe we used to identify the cross symbol or the red mark symbol is there, they're injurious to health. The same way, the e-utilized products or the e-waste must and should have these sort of cautions to how to dispose. We should not throw. So India or the developing countries, maximum they are facing relating to the plastic, plaster of Paris. So these are the different types of hazards. So where it will take millions of years to convert it into the earth, and if they're thrown into the earth itself loses its fertility. So environmental hazards was created. So due to the good campaigning or through mass media, so we can educate the business people. Business people has to keep strict rules rather than education. We should keep strict rules how to dispose their e-waste. And the consumers or the community, when you educate them, so they can get free from health risks which are associated with improper e-waste disposals. And another important solution we can provide for the e-waste is investment in recycling infrastructure. Means when we want to go for the recycling of these e-waste mechanism, so we should invest those recycled material in infrastructure activities. Means more innovative projects has to be take over. What are the utilization of these e-waste and converting into the used products. So recycling should be done. So for that the government should allocate the funds and develop advanced recycling facilities. So which will handle to increase the volume of e-waste. Means when advanced or the innovative facilities are provided relating to the e-waste, so automatically the larger amount of the e-waste are converted into useful products. So which will create as a sustainable and environmentally free solutions. Means when the government comes with a good or encouraging investment in recycling structure, and these e-waste are recycled and utilized in the infrastructure format, automatically what happens means the large number of e-waste are converted as a useful product and sustained those environmental and friendly eco solutions could be done. So the above are the two cases where we can say relating to the steel industry of India and e-waste disposal of in India, relating to the government handles the dumping of activities. So the above examples which are facing a little bit a problem in India not only encourages here the country not only encourages the external price discriminations, but it has to impose regulatory framework which should be revised time by time, and anti-dumping measures to be taken for which the sustainability of the natural environment to be done. Means once the government is regulatory, revising the rules, regulations, frameworks, and looking for a good recycling mechanism, so the country will have a good sustainability in utilization of the natural resources, which will not create hazards for the nature and also the human lives. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.